I'm Rick Brimacombe on behalf of the Minneapolis Club and my firm Brimacombe and Associates. Welcome to the 12th season of Club Entrepreneur. I run this like an academic year, so we start in September and go to June, so welcome back. Hope you all had a good summer vacation and are ready to rock and roll now that fall is here. Generally speaking, I try to keep this about the panel and the panelists and the topics, and I don't say too much about my world, but I do have to say, for a couple of different reasons, I know Mcleod has served Centerra, and I know Irish Titan has served Centerra, and I've been working with them since about 4 years ago. Yesterday in the paper, Centerra raised $14 million, and it's a portfolio company I've been working on, and that was a big event, so yay, team. And then I launched Brimacombe Capital over the summer, and for anybody who's interested in learning more about that, please see me. So those are the Rick world over the summer. So again, welcome back. Hope you all had a good summer vacation. Let me ask a couple of questions. First of all, who's new to Club Entrepreneur? Okay, so you can go to clube.com and you can sign up for the newsletter if you'd like to hear about future events. And who was here back in January when we did round one with the panel of women business owners? Okay, so a healthy amount. So welcome back to you. Again, 40% of new businesses in the United States are women-led. Women entrepreneurs are the fastest growing segment of small business owners, and as such, I thought it'd be real good to revisit this topic. We had a wonderful event back in January, and so invited our women business owner panel back, and we're doing that. So welcome to our panelists, welcome to you all. Our sponsors, Schwegman Lumber Woosner is an intellectual property law firm. Olson Thielen CPAs is a full-service accounting firm, and Allison and Cheryl are here in the audience somewhere. We got one over here and one over here, so thank you for your support. Olson Thielen's been a sponsor since 2009. Irish Titan is a web development and e-commerce company. Darren Lynch here in front, and where's Megan? Megan's somewhere over there. So thank you to Irish Titan for your work with Club E as well as your work with Centerra. Sunbelt Business Brokers. Peggy, where is Peggy? Oh, right there, right up in front. Welcome, Peggy, and thank you for your support. And then Mcleod and Company is a holistic marketing agency. We have Sam Stender over here to my left, and Sam helps with marketing for Club Entrepreneur, as well as I mentioned that Mcleod's done a bunch of work for Centerra, going back to their days when it was owned by Tonya, which we'll hear a little bit about in a bit. Highland Bank is a local family-owned community bank with about $500 million in assets. They're an ongoing sponsor of Club Entrepreneur, as is the Network Connect, which is a catalytic gateway for connecting investors, companies, and service providers. Okay, reminder, brown paper ticket, if you can do that, makes the life easier for the club. We had a little snafu. It got shut down a little earlier yesterday. Couple of you made sure we were on our toes, so thanks for doing that. But in general, if you can sign up brown paper ticket ahead of time, it's the first Thursday of the month. Clube.com. Again, there's a newsletter there that you can sign up for here about future events. Club Entrepreneur Minneapolis is a LinkedIn group with about 2,700 people. It's a way to connect up with the folks here in the group. Meetup has about 2,000 people in the Club group, so that's also a way to stay in touch. And then I mentioned to you that I do this in partnership with the Minneapolis Club. There's a little thing on your page with future and upcoming events for the club. Anybody who'd like to learn about memberships or doing events here or whatnot, Minneapolis Club's been real good for Club Entrepreneur. It's been good for me and my business, as well as with the family too. I've done a lot of family things here over the years. Business of the Month is something that Sam Stender and Mcleod has been doing now for about a year or so. And our business for the month of September is Brokerage Resources, which is a life insurance brokerage firm tailored for independent financial advisors. And they rep 26 different lines of insurance products. And what we do, and there's a fishbowl out on the table outside, so as you're leaving, if you'd like to put your card in there, we draw a company per month, and it goes out through the Club E-Social, so feel free to add your name to that list for the drawing. And then upcoming events, there's a little sheet on the tables for upcoming events. We have Club Entrepreneur in St. Paul on September 19th, Chum Struve is over here, and we're doing the women business owners over in St. Paul as well with a different panel. And we've been doing some social stuff and some posting about women business owners this month, so it's kind of our theme of the month. Club Entrepreneur Hudson, generally, i.e. the name Hudson is in Hudson, but the guy who runs that, Jeff Redmond, is doing an event here in Minneapolis about scaling your cash on September 20th. I've talked to Darren about that and other people. That's a great event. You might want to do that September 20th. September 25th, Club Ian Upsize is doing a family business guide here in Minneapolis. And anybody who wants to talk about or be in a conversation around family businesses and the joys as well as the challenges with doing that, that's September 25th. September 27th is the Irish Titan Ecom Forum, and these cards have been put out on your table. If you have any questions, see Darren or Megan. They bring in national speakers and national sponsors and try to highlight the e-commerce activity that's going on in the upper Midwest. It's a great event, well attended, and wonderful content from domain experts, and your time would be well spent if you were to attend that again September 27th. October 4th, we're back here talking about intellectual property with protecting your clever ideas. One last one, I guess, October 11th, Owners Forum. For those of you who are business owners, there's an event specially designed for business owners to talk about transition issues on October 11th that Club Entrepreneur is a part of. Okay, so before we get to today's panel, I spoke on the phone yesterday and earlier today with Peggy Demuse from Sunbelt Business Brokers, and the topic of women business owners came up, and the opportunities for folks that were looking to either buy a business or try to grow that business. And I was just going to ask for any comments that you'd like to share with the group, because it was an interesting conversation. Either come up or...
Just maybe real quickly, how many women in the room own their own business? Okay, so most. And how many of you bought that business versus started it? Okay, very few. That's what I was talking to Rick about. It's fascinating to me that we have so many businesses for sale every day, but yet most of our buyers that are coming through the door are men. And what I've seen is that it's like women start their own businesses, but it tends to be men that buy them, which is interesting, and it's also a great thing to be thinking about as you're growing your business and as you're thinking about your exit plan. Keep in mind that it could very well be a man that's going to buy your business instead of a woman. So one of the things that's really interesting is there's so many opportunities out there for women in business, and there's opportunities for government contracts, and everybody's aware of all the women business owner incentives. But occasionally we'll see a woman-owned business that has taken so much advantage of those that it almost becomes hard to sell. When you start looking at who's the buyer, if it's not another woman or a minority coming in, it can be difficult to sell. So there's pros and cons to it. Certainly, there's a lot of opportunity for women to come in and buy an existing business and grow it significantly just by being able to qualify for a woman-owned business and take advantage of all those incentives. At the same time, you need to kind of keep that weighed out with the don't go too heavy. Make sure that you've got a good balance of business coming in. So it was just kind of an interesting conversation that Rick and I had, and thought it was probably worth sharing a little bit about. But anybody have any questions on that? Or nope. Okay, back to you.
As I mentioned, Peggy and Sunbelt have been ongoing sponsors of Club Entrepreneur, so thank you very much, and feel free to reach out to Peggy here after the meeting, or if you need her contact information, reach out to me. Okay, so with all of that, to today's panel, Sharon Bloodworth is the CEO of White Oaks Wealth Advisors. Megan Elliott is the CEO and founding principal at PVN. Tonya Korpi Mcleod is the founder of Mcleod and is wearing a couple of different hats, which I'll let her tell you about. And then Gwen Martin is the partner of Scouts Company. And welcome to our four panelists. Again, this is an encore performance of what we did back in January. So why don't we start with a minute or so each and give a little bit about your background. And Sharon, we'll start here and we'll go down that direction.
Perfect. Well, my name is Sharon Bloodworth. I'm CEO of White Oaks Wealth Advisors and White Oaks Investment Management. We are the largest 100% Minnesota independent women-owned investment firm. I bought my partner out 11 months ago, so it's been a wild and very fun ride. I feel like I'm a teenager and my parents have gone now. It's been really brilliant. My staff are actually mostly women, although that was not by design. They're always the best candidate for the job, and 2 of them are sitting over there. And I call them my superhumans because they're amazing. We also have a separate firm down in Longboat Key in Florida. Most of my clients are hit the Minnesota estate tax or federal estate tax issues, so we look for more attractive tax states as well. As a background, I have a British accent. My dad worked in oil, so I grew up in the Congo and Indonesia and Texas and all over the world. So I have a unique perspective of women in other countries and under other sort of religious environments, which I always thank my lucky stars that I live in America. I could not do what I do elsewhere. This truly is a land of opportunity, and I know that people talk about, again, sort of needing more equal rights. They are closer to that than most every other place I've lived in, so I'm so thankful for this country, for giving me my great start. I was very lucky in that I was brought up sort of sometimes on a little island where Margaret Thatcher was Prime Minister and the Queen was Queen, and I always tell people the only thing I thought growing up I couldn't be was Pope. But other than that, I could do it. And I mentioned last time that I collect shoes of very famous women. So I have Margaret Thatcher's and I have Martina Navratilova's and Dame Judi Dench's and Audrey Hepburn's, and I buy them because if you think about their hardest day in their respective industry, they're pretty amazing women. And I haven't told you this yet, Rick, but I bought something that was off my proper collection. I now have Queen Victoria's nightdress. And so I thought maybe if I sleep in her nightdress with Margaret Thatcher's shoes on, I'll build an empire somewhere.
Now, you didn't snag Judy Garland's shoes the other day.
No.
Yeah, be careful.
Unfortunately not. I think they're found now.
Oh, okay. All right. Just checking.
Exactly.
All right.
But I always consider myself, I think our generation, we're the luckiest generation because we sit between watching our mothers who mainly were encouraged to stay at home, and then the next generation that really has no boundaries put on them. I remember growing up is that I always tried to convince my dad to send me to a Swiss finishing school because I thought, I'd marry some rich European aristocrat and life would be really easy. And if you've watched Downton Abbey, it's really not a good job, and it ends up quite miserably and everybody leaves. But I'm very thankful for the fact that my mother pretty much kept me on the straight and narrow, and I ended up where I am.
Great. Well, welcome. Welcome back. Megan.
So it's always both a challenge and an honor to follow Sharon. But at least I can say, honestly, and now for something completely different. My company is called PVN, and I thought I'd give you a little bit about what we do and then the story of how I got there. So my office, we're a team of reuse strategists for the built environment. And the built environment we think of as primarily buildings, but also bridges, civic plazas, things that we build. We work with what we call visionary stewards. These are primarily owners and developers, but people who see potential in often very distressed real estate. And we use history to make value in these properties. So financial value, community value, cultural value. And we often start with a very underutilized space, and our goal is to turn it into a vibrant, financially viable, long-term sustainable resource for the community. So I came to entrepreneurship through what I think was a very inevitable evolution. And I'll tell you, if you were here in January, this is a new story that I haven't told before. So some of you may remember the World Series earthquake that happened in 1989. And I'll date myself here a little bit, but this is the earthquake that happened. World Series game was on, and the upper deck fell on the lower deck of the Bay Bridge, and they stopped the game. I don't know if anyone remembers this. Anyway, I was in high school, so now you know how old I am. And at the time, people think of this as the San Francisco earthquake, but it was actually a couple of hours south that it happened. And the coastal town that I lived in was completely decimated. So we were a town that was built on the ocean, and our main downtown was on a riverbed. And if you know how earthquakes work, if you're on a riverbed and an earthquake hits, you lose everything. So the town was within minutes completely flattened. And we, no water, no power. We spent a couple days in the car because just through the shaking, the house kept shaking, and there was no supplies anyway. So it was a point in time where there was incredible loss throughout the community, and you could see the loss, but more importantly, there was almost a palpable feeling of being lost. And people sort of walked around almost like zombies without sort of the physical landmarks they were used to. The buildings were gone. What we think of as where the streets were, that was gone. And it was this sense of, I don't know where I am anymore. And I think to this day, and it's now been 25 plus years since that happened, to this day you go back to that community and there's still a little bit of sense of being lost. And to the credit of the city, they rebuilt almost entirely within a couple of years. But we're still a little lost. And it's at that point in time where I realized how important the navigation we use of the built world around us is. And so as a freshman in high school, I joined a construction crew. That was my solution. And I learned how to build. I worked for the Youth Conservation Corps, which is a great program, very cheap labor for the state of California, but terrific. I also learned through construction that I am not the best follower, but prefer to lead, and went on to lead a construction crew in high school. So I took that passion for understanding the built environment to college. I studied engineering to understand how we build, and I studied studio art to understand why we build. And I continued that into graduate school, where I studied engineering and architecture. And when I started my career, I started doing, you won't be surprised, earthquake engineering, to understand how to keep these buildings life safe through a seismic event, which is a very specialized part of engineering in the building world. But through the course of that experience, I came to understand that while design and construction are very, very important, they are only a very small piece of the puzzle to keeping our built world intact. And so then I started to look at all the other pieces that we need and decided that the only way I could really solve the problem was through entrepreneurship. So the company that I started was intended to solve this problem of how do we keep our built spaces vibrant, alive, financially viable, so that they can continue to tell us the stories and then also teach us through their stories how to go forward. So that is the company I started 6 years ago, PVN. We are a team, and we bring together all these different pieces that we need to work with existing buildings.
Great. Thank you very much. How about that? Tonya.
My name is Tonya Korpi Mcleod. I have a background in marketing and advertising. I kind of worked in marketing and advertising in San Francisco and New York and Seattle throughout my 20s. And then I moved to, I didn't mean to, but I went to Europe on vacation and I missed my flight home. And I decided it was a sign from God, and I stayed for 10 years. And so in that, I started working in oil and gas, and I met my husband, and he was British, and he thought it would be really romantic to move to small town America and run a little business. And I spent about 2 years going, it's not like TV. But we ended up here anyway. So we bought 7 Valvoline Instant Oil Change stores. I started a marketing business, it was about 2007, that grew into becoming Mcleod & Co., which is a sponsor here. Mcleod & Co. is a strategic marketing agency, focuses a lot in digital because that's the way life is now, but primarily it's about strategy and helping companies have a marketing plan that is actually going to work and to know why it works, to be successful that way. So I spent about the last 10, 11 years building that up, and in about 15 months ago, my husband died really suddenly, which was obviously hugely disruptive, but it has been a real opportunity. So one day I found myself owning, independently by myself, by that time we had 8 Valvoline Instant Oil Change stores and the Mcleod business, and that was way too much because I was in the weeds and running Mcleod every day. So I'm very, very fortunate to have had such a brilliant team, and I say had in the past tense because I sold to Allison Was, the leader of that team, And they are still a brilliant team that's running really great. But that was a really great gift for me to be able to both receive and to give. We didn't give it, but you know what I mean? And so, now in the past 15 months, kind of my journey has changed quite a bit. To my surprise, I've embraced being in automotive, which is crazy. I've signed a development agreement for 5 more stores over the next 5 years and moving that forward. And I'm also kind of I've taken a stake in a sales consulting startup that I'm very excited about. I can't get away from the startups and from wanting to do that kind of stuff. And then I'm also getting my toes wet in different kinds of investing and that type of thing. So it's really cool to kind of go from starting a business and kind of being in the weeds and then being elevated through that and get to see a much bigger picture kind of situation. And so, yeah, that's where I come from.
So I'm Gwen Martin, and I am a business owner and entrepreneur. I have spent the majority of my career in the consulting realm, in the consulting field, having been part of growing and or starting 4 different agencies during that time. And it was really through the work that we do with our clients and the stories that I would hear through our consultants doing that work that I became really curious in different business models and how different companies monetize ideas and really different business structures, and really kind of got me going down the path of being an entrepreneur myself. I currently have ownership involvement in 3 different companies. The first is called AMA, which is a parenting education company. A business partner and I decided to buy a company to grow and lead and scale. We worked with Peggy DeMuse, business broker extraordinaire here in the front table. And we found exactly what Peggy said. We were 2 of the only women at the table, and oftentimes 2 of the only small handful of women in a room when it came to looking at different business models and things that were on the market. Peggy brought us AMA, and it gave us the confidence to, knowing that we were among such a minority of females at the table, it kind of gave us that confidence to put together a very competitive offer to buy that. Being a parenting education company, talking about childbirth and breastfeeding and et cetera, it's not necessarily a male buy, it was definitely a female buy, and we knew it would be some time before that owner found another set of females to take it on. So that's the first model. AMA's about 10 years old. We've got 8 locations in the metro. We work with many of the large hospital systems, and currently on track to double that from where we first bought it 2 years ago. The company that, right when I was closing, the week that we were closing on AMA, a previous colleague of mine from a consulting firm we had been part of growing for the previous 10 years, approached me and asked me if I would like to partner with him and start another agency. I couldn't resist. He's an awesome individual and a great reputation, so I couldn't resist and said I would love to work with him, but only if I could tend to AMA at the same time and kind of do both. So we partnered. We now have 4 partners in total and have been growing that agency well. That's the Scouts. It's a finance and accounting consulting firm. We also do perm placement. We're headquartered out of the West End, growing nicely as well. The third company is a restaurant concept called People's Organic. That's a different model, different ownership structure. I've been involved in that one for about 10 years. We've got 9 locations locally right now, 2 on the East Coast, and we're opening up 2 in the airport by the end of 2018. That's a franchise model, and it's an ownership team within that franchise model, the corporate structure. We also have a manufacturing and distribution model as well, where we sell the coffee and People's Organic chocolate in grocery stores across the United States. So 3 different businesses, 3 different models and ownership structures, but super fascinating, and I'm having a great time with all 3.
Good, thank you. So in the audience, part of the reason we did the event as an encore today was to give you all more of a chance to ask questions. So I'm going to do a couple of things here, but I want you to think about questions you'd like to ask our panelists, and then we'll turn it over to you here shortly. So give yourself a little time to think about what you'd like to ask our panelists. So Ladies, why don't you take a minute or two just to kind of talk about the topic, women business owners in general, and then I'll ask a question and then we'll turn it over to the audience. So whoever would like to jump in first, feel free. Again, just kind of an overview, thoughts on the topic.
As I mentioned, having moved fairly recently from running a business, there's Mcleod, and really being in that day-to-day to now managing businesses from afar, that has really changed my perspective as a business owner at all, let alone a women business owner. I'm out of the weeds, and I'm now in a very strong position as an owner, obviously, and an advisor, but then you're an advisor in something that you know nothing about. Or that you don't kind of necessarily have the respect of that. And I think that that's a position that I've seen men in, and I didn't really have any. I mean, I think we're all kind of, you don't, fish don't know they're wet. You kind of grow up in that and you think, well, of course that person is giving direction. But to then walk into an automotive business and be like, yep, I'm the boss. It really, there's a lot of kind of irony in that. You're still, though, expected to set a cultural tone, and no matter whether people know that they want that or not, you do have to set that cultural tone, and you are where the buck stops. So the decision recently with Mintex, which I own 100%, and that's the way it kind of has to be because of the franchise agreement, so I cannot share ownership with my people. I am the signer and the financier, but to make that decision to sign that agreement, I really had to get my team on board and be like, you guys are doing the work. And I don't want to pretend about that. And I don't want to pretend that I'm in there, pushing anything forward. I'm signing checks and I'm dealing with banks. And you're doing the rest. And so that has really changed my perspective a lot to realizing that I have the emotional intelligence that's required to manage those relationships is really the glue that I need to provide to keep all of that together in this particular type of a organization, I guess. And I also need to know what's going on in the organization and have that kind of a good relationship with them that they can't. I don't want to say they can't snow me, but so that they want to tell you what's going on and that you want to have this relationship. So I did have to get in with them and say, how. And tell them that openly, and ask them, how do you guys want to support this relationship? What do you want this to look like? And how do we want to build that together kind of going forward? So going in and building that trust, I think, is something that I did instinctively as a woman that I don't think people necessarily expected, but doing that and not trying to be a man was what made that work.
And I think I also really like being in a real male-dominated environment. There are only 2.5% of private fund managers that are women, so I'm extremely happy to be in that minority. And my view generally is that things change over time. I remember when we were younger, your gynecologist was nearly always male, and that was really sort of the medical industry. And now it's hard to imagine many people veer towards women generally for that. And so it really is being a pioneer in your industry and putting your face out there to show somebody else the path in. There are significant studies done about women in investing, and there's a Finnish study that studied, I think, over 17 years, about 1 million Finnish traders, and established that the women ended up as an average 21% up, and the male contingent was about that in the reverse. And there have been continued studies with it, but yet the industry hasn't changed very much, and about only 23% of women hold the Certified Financial Planner designation, which is the top financial planning designation. So if you're in what's perceived as a more sales-based environment that's not very friendly or you work unsocial hours, you have to think about the nursing industry. When you have to work shift works, that's extremely unsocial hours for a family. So there's no real reason why women can't move towards finance and just break down that door and realize that it's actually a really fabulous place to be. Because in the future, I always tell everybody that we're actually competing against robots, not against each other. It's really not about the man having the job or the woman having the job. Is can you stay ahead of the robots? And I think that's really important to understand in everybody's industry, because that's really who we're competing with. But I think the media has a lot to answer for. There's an interesting organization that was started by Gina Davis, the actress, and it's really sort of a study in media analysis that says that for every one woman on the screen, there are 3 men. And so, again, if it's your daughter or your sister or your mother not really seeing themselves represented, that's the key. I always think for every country, the same that's happening in China and other countries that are now opening themselves to the internet and to media, is that really what you see in the media and on the internet is the future. So I challenge everyone to go out and create media companies and and put yourself in the position that you want to be seen in, and before you know it, you'll be there.
Great, thank you.
So I put together my couple of lessons learned as a woman in entrepreneurship, and particularly in a field dominated, a primarily male-dominated field of design, construction, and real estate. So some of the lessons learned. One is that no one has all the skills they need when they start a company. And actually, that's a lesson I learned from Rick, who told me I didn't have all the skills I needed to run a company.
Did you believe him?
In a very loving and caring way. And a helpful, too.
Yes. So that being said, I did start an advisory board when I was starting my company. And I think one of the unique advantages that I have as being a woman is that I was very receptive and open to both criticism, but also mentorship. And I was able to set an ego aside and look for the people that I knew had the right skills to help me through the startup process. And I continue to maintain a relationship with that board today. So that was one of my first lessons learned as an entrepreneur. Another lesson that I've learned and continue to learn as a business owner, and I will say in my team, I have 7 on my team, and 6 of them are women, which, similar to Sharon, was not intentional, but truly were the best applicants for the team that we have. And I have learned that women work very, very differently than men, and I know there's lots of stories out there, but I can tell you firsthand, it is truly a big difference to have a woman-dominated team versus a male-dominated team. And some of the key differences include collaboration. I will tell you that we have an open office, and we are almost collaborative to our own detriment. But it means that we get great solutions that can cross a variety of disciplines seamlessly, because we have an open communication platform within which to work, and we have people who are very, very open to working with their colleagues and listening to their colleagues. So 1 is the collaborative nature. 2 is the emotional intelligence part. And that is something that I think I've been more acutely aware of just in the last year or 2. But one of the things I've noticed about my team, and especially the women on my team, is that emotional intelligence in their decision-making is just as high as any sort of technical competence they will bring to the table. And that does significantly influence the solutions they develop and the strategies they develop for making a project move forward. So those are 2 key pieces. And I think what this allows us to do, another advantage of being a woman-owned business, is we're able to set up an environment that is very conducive to success for women in business, both in terms of the way we work, the way we're open to working with others, and then it also brings in an entirely different talent pool that we can access. I would say I get 5 resumes from women compared to every 1 resume I get from a male, which is unusual, but I think that women see us as a more receptive company. And so therefore we can access a broader, deeper, wider pool of applicants. And oftentimes applicants that maybe wouldn't be able to apply somewhere else, because we can offer flexibility, we can offer mobility, we can offer alternate hours. I'll be the first to say, I don't work 9 to 5. I can't work 9 to 5 because I have a child and I'm a primary caregiver, so I never work 9 to 5. I work around the clock, I work 24/7, but it's never 9 to 5. And then my last lesson learned, there's never a good time to start a business. There will always be market cycles. There will always be family demands. But I will say that I started my business when my daughter was 6, and she's now 13, and she still takes the school bus to my office every day.
Great, thank you. Gwen?
Yeah. Well, I will just add that I'm a big fan of entrepreneurship for males and females. It's a great thing to see more and more females coming into the fold and starting their own businesses or buying their own businesses. I think in the same way that earlier in, let's say, several decades ago, even buying a house was a male-dominated thing, and then females are now buying their own houses, like it's completely normal, and it is normal. So that same trend will follow with buying businesses and starting their own businesses with females as well. That said, a few things that I've observed in my time is that I am not a fan of joining organizations that are 100% female associations or female networking groups. I think it cuts out half of the opportunity for perspectives and experiences and advice and banter and a whole lot of other things. And so I don't consciously get involved in 100% female groups for that reason. And I like to say that I would like to be recognized as a strong business leader, not needing to mention my gender as part of my accomplishments. And so I'd leave it at that.
Great, thank you. Okay, so, yeah, how about all right, so opportunity for you all to chime in with questions you have. I'll get to more if I don't get audience participation, but here's one over here.
This is a question for Gwen. You have purchased a lot of the ventures that you're involved in. I'm interested in, because I imagine these businesses came with their own organizational cultures, history of processes and doing things. How were you able to, do you have any examples to share of how you were able to enact effective organizational change to enact your vision for where the business needs to go?
Okay, let me say it over here in case you didn't hear. Was basically getting involved with the business. How do you enact organizational change? And it was framed up as Gwen buying a company, but Sharon bought her company. Tonya got thrown into a situation that wasn't her culture, that she had to go from 0 to 100 overnight, and I'm sure Megan had challenges dealing with the situation that she was building too. So why don't we give everybody a chance to talk about that?
Yeah, and so real quick, I think that that's a great question, and contrasting the businesses I'm involved in, Scouts is a startup. We're now in our third year of business, so we've had a chance to really define what we want that culture to be, and in a collaborative way, stake out what our values are and what our personality of our brand is and all of those things. AMA was 10 years old when we got involved in ownership of it, and so you're right, it had its own culture and its own social ways. I think in both situations, and People's Organic for that matter as well, it's the exact same answer, is that from a leadership standpoint, really painting out what you see the vision to be. Where are you going? What's your vision? Where are you putting that? Where's that flag going to be in what mountain? And then rallying people to be excited and bought into that, and what is their role on that team to get to that end goal. And so respectful of the culture, definitely, that we walked into with AMA, definitely having a good time building that culture in real time with Scouts. But in both cases, it's really where are we going, how do we want to get there, and who are we going to be along the way, and painting that vision so people know where what their part in that is. I think that's a big part of it.
Anybody else chime in?
Yeah, in my case, going into and taking over Mintex, which was about, the management team was about 4 people, and then about 8 managers below that, and then on and on. But I knew what I wanted it to be. They were 90% men. The way that I went in there was not to share a vision, because I knew that probably wasn't going to fly. Like, hi, here's my vision. So I spent a painful amount of time understanding what their visions were first. And by having them asking that question, they had to formulate a vision. And that took some time for them as well. And so everybody coming together and sharing their visions together, which we did over about 3 months, and it was a very pointed exercise, helped us all to see that there could be a vision, and then where we had common ground and where we didn't. And then from that, we painted a single picture, and everybody saw their fingerprints on it, so it was a lot easier to move that direction. And I am lucky enough that my kind of guy in charge has an emotional, an EQ, if you will, that's just off the charts, and bench strength is his favorite word.
And I would say that I run mine a little bit differently in that there's a little country in Asia called Bhutan, and it's known as the happiest place on earth. The people are the happiest. And it's run by a benevolent dictator. And having looked at a lot of different sort of forms of government, I always thought benevolent dictatorship is the best, because you make fast decisions, but as long as everybody's happy, we're good. So, and I'm also a massive Disney fan, and so for me it's all about the experience, the client experience, the staff experience, and so that's just sort of percolated over the years, where it sort of enforced Disney lovers in our firm. And when you get to 10 years, you're kind of almost sent off to Disney for it. And so.
I just had one piece to follow up, particularly on what Tonya said. I have the luxury of having a small team. And so from a culture development perspective, we are very intentional about me setting the long-term vision for the company, but everything from mission, core values, culture, that is all a collaborative process that includes everyone in the office. And I think one of the things that I've learned recently, and we recently redid, or have been working on redoing our core values and who we are, is I meet quarterly with everyone in my office, just to check in, talk about goals, talk about where we're going as a company. But I got consistent feedback that one of the things they valued most about working with me and working with the company is that they got to participate in that process. And so it really was a sign to me that people really do value having a hand or having a fingerprint, as you said, on the company culture.
Other questions? Over here, Kate.
One of the themes that we hear a lot, especially from women business owners, is this working in male-dominated fields. I also work in a very heavily male-dominated field. And I wonder what your perspectives are on where's the balance, or how important is it to kind of assimilate to the male culture to find that success versus carving out your own way of doing it, whether it's working, alternative hours to accommodate for children, and where's that balance, and where do you feel that weighs into success, kind of playing in the male world versus carving out your own as a woman business owner?
So again, to repeat it for over here, basically in working in a male-dominated field, how do you strike a balance between who you are as a female and person and surviving in that world? So,
And I think for me, it's the you have to acknowledge the field that you're in and work with what you have. So I sort of explained this last time that there have been several surveys done that most people would prefer to work with an older white male as an advisor. If they're just picking them from a photo, that's who I want to work with. And then it's the younger white male, younger white female, older white female. And then I think they had sort of an African-American gentleman on there. And so if you think about it, before people have even seen you, when they're looking at your website, they're already making those sort of assumptions in. So we have older white males on our website. So it's only when you come through the door that it's bait and switch and it's us instead. But no, he still exists. But for me, it was important that, again, I don't want to shut any doors whatsoever, and be open to all. And then as soon as they start working with you, it's very different. But we do make the firm, very family friendly. I think most of my staff have young children, if not you're on the way. And so when I started, it was a very different environment where you just had to put your head down and work. My daughter was the first one in daycare and the last one to leave, and it was a different environment through all of my working life. So I wanted something different, for my staff.
Kate, I think that is a great question. But I do think that, and Sharon, you hit on it a little bit, I think the answer to that question is actually changing every day. Because I think that even through the course of me starting my company, we tried to assimilate more in the beginning, and I think if we go back a generation, you didn't have an option but to assimilate to a male-dominated field in terms of expectations on hours, expectations on responsiveness, expectations on communication style. But now I think we're starting to see that people are recognizing distinct advantages to having both more diversity in teams, and we can talk about diversity across a variety of different communities. But also we have more buyers that are looking for a different type of team, and more clients that are looking for a different type of team. So I think that actually we are in a very dynamic time right now where the answer to that question is literally changing every day. And I think that we internally are recognizing that we can leverage the fact that we have a primarily woman-dominated team at this point where we couldn't have done that a couple of years ago.
For me, it's kind of a twofold kind of aspect to that. There's my male-dominated team that works in the organization that I own, and that's one thing. And by, again, as I said, kind of helping them be part of that vision, that culture kind of works pretty well. And then there's the culture that I'm a member of as a franchisee owner. There are 72 franchisee owners in Valvoline. Hello, I'm the only woman. I am not much for strip bars and cigars. So I run with the wolves, but I kind of have to not care that much. You guys go to your strip club, I'm not going. You're happy that I'm not going, and that's all fine. But at the same time, I still need a seat at that table because I need to be able to control policies and that type of stuff. So I find it to be a super, super fine line, and there has to be a little bit of F you with a smile. It's a lot of this. But yeah, it's a thing.
Yeah, I would echo these comments as well, that things have really changed, and on one hand, assimilating into the industry that you might be in, but doing it with your own style, your own integrity, and keeping to who you are as well. And at the same time, really respecting your team and what they might need as far as flexibility and family things that come up or professional things that they're doing on the side with education is great for maintaining and keeping a cohesive team long term, meaning not having turnover. So yeah, respecting people's life balance as well.
Great, thank you. Others? Yeah, right here in front.
Hi. I had a question about self-leadership, if that's all right. And I'm looking at you all, and I'm hearing your stories of wonderfully dynamic women, and I'm curious, what would you say would be either a character trait or a personal discipline or even a relationship that's been essential for your own leadership development progress?
Did you hear that over here? She was projecting pretty good. You all heard it? Okay.
I think that's a brilliant question. I always think that, I'm a lousy skier by the way, but when you ski behind someone who skis better than you, it automatically raises your game. So it's really important to have people ahead of you that are better skiers than you. So in my life, I've had 3 lucky Bobs. Bob Klosterman, who is the partner that I bought out. I have a Bob Dow, who's my original boss that I worked for, that again I sort of mimicked, and then my business coach as well. And so my skiing behind them has really brought me to where I am.
Certainly, this is going to depend on who you're asking the question to, because we all have what we do well. I think in relationship to this particular panel, I think one of the key pieces to being successful as a woman in business is there has to be just a little bit of blindness to the context. And I think we in the past have all talked about the fact that there probably were obstacles in my way that I frankly just didn't notice because I wasn't aware of them. So I didn't understand that I shouldn't be doing construction at 16 on a crew.
Thank goodness.
Right?
That you
But
didn't understand this.
I didn't understand until I think I was in a college class of I went to a small school, but some class like differential equations or something like that, and I didn't even notice until probably halfway through the second final or the second midterm that I was the only girl in the class. So there was a certain amount of I didn't look around me to look to see what I should be doing, and by focusing on what I wanted to do, that allowed me to kind of follow a goal or follow a dream by, frankly, just having a little bit of blindness about what the context was.
And I think your question about self-leadership and developing those habits or whatever it is for that, I think is a really interesting one that it just kind of popped into my head this second. But I think one of the best skills or traits that I have had is being able to recognize what is good and positive in working even in people that I don't necessarily have a lot of respect for, and being able to take the goodness, and I'm meaning that in a large way, out of whatever situation there is, and kind of having the habit of not walking away from any situation without saying, okay, what was positive in that, or what is there to take away to learn from that, and just being quiet. But in your own leadership, knowing that you can take things from places that aren't necessarily attractive.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I in my career have not had one like single consistent mentor or person that I was emulating, but really kind of a combination of things that I've noticed, maybe even from competitors, to your point.
Yeah, for sure.
I see a competitor doing something, or maybe somebody I respect, I read an article or watch a TED Talk, something that I want to take away a little nugget from, and kind of a combination of all those things added up, but not a single person that has been that guiding person throughout my career, anyway.
Great, thank you. All right, so 30 seconds, a minute, just to kind of sum up final thoughts for the group. Whatever you feel like sharing, a couple little takeaways, words of wisdom.
Just start.
Yeah.
Just
Just
start.
I say the
Just
same.
do
I
it.
think it's important to, if you have an idea, if you know somebody who has a passion around something, to encourage that and foster that. It's never a good time to start
Yes,
a
it's
business or buy a business. Nobody ever comes to your house and deems you worthy that day. And so, yeah, just do it, and you learn by trial and error. And
And if you're
ask
scared to
advice.
death, it just means you're paying attention.
Yeah, people will help. Yeah.
And I also think you want to surround yourself with people that really champion you. You know, my husband was one of my biggest champions, and so is my mother. And if you talk to mostly them all day, you're good, you're set.
Moms are great. They're great customers, too.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
My last piece in line with these other comments is that to not be afraid to ask for advice, and asking for advice includes both asking for advice but also learning from the people around you and recognizing both what you're doing well but also what you could improve, and being open to changing quickly and dynamically to respond to what you're learning all the time.
Great, well, let's thank our panelists. Thank you all for being here. Again, if you want to learn more or hear more about this particular topic in St. Paul on September 19th, we're doing another panel, Women Business Owners. Otherwise, there's a whole host of events on clube.com. And thank you for being here. Again, hope you had a good summer, and all the best for the remainder of the year. Thank you.